Today, it's vibrancy versus accuracy, precision versus pop, with the Panasonic W95A versus the Hisense U8N. Up next.
I've seen things people wouldn't believe.
Hey, what's up guys? I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me as we check out the Panasonic W95A Mini LED versus the Hisense U8N ULED Mini LED. It's 55 inches versus 65 inches today. Unfortunately, I did not have the same size to compare. However, it definitely is an interesting comparison as it's the signature of two different manufacturers, the way they look at processing and image quality. Panasonic is all about precision, bringing the filmmaker's intent home to you. It's all about accuracy, where Hisense is about vibrancy, HDR impact. Both TVs have excellent gaming features as well as excellent local dimming. There are some huge differences, but without further ado, let's check out the Panasonic W95A Mini LED versus the Hisense U8N ULED Mini LED. Thank you so much for watching. All right, guys, let's do it. Let's check out the design. Hisense U8N metal center stand, backlit remote brush metal, very premium look from Hisense, very reminiscent of Samsung higher end displays. The Panasonic W95A has one position out wide, very simplistic design, Amazon Fire remote with a learn button. The W95A is a Fire TV and the Hisense is a Google TV, the Google operating system. Both look fairly premium. I would give the edge here to the Hisense, looking more high-end. They are both simplistic. I like the build quality of them both, and they also both sound excellent. Each has a subwoofer on the back side. Now, the larger Panasonics may have different positions for the out wide stand. However, the larger sizes I saw in person had the same ones. Both are glossy, however, the Panasonic is much more glossy and much more reflective. The U8N has better reflection handling. I do like the screen glossier. It has the same glossy screen as an OLED. You can see the differences in how I show up in one versus the other. Something to keep in mind if you're going to have the W95A in a very bright room. It's not the brightest TV in the world. It might not be able to battle both reflections and lack of brightness. The U8N has a better reflection handling overall while still being glossy. Moving into our demo material, you're going to see me go through every preset. I'm not going to call them out. I have labeled them as we go. However, if you saw my U7N versus U8N comparison, the HDR theater was kind of faded out in that comparison. Interestingly enough, the U8N looks faded out in this comparison in comparison to the W95A in these shots. HDR theater is my favorite preset of them all for Hisense, as it is accurate and at the same time bright and punchy enough. You'll notice the brightness difference with the Hisense U8N versus the Panasonic W95A. However, keep in mind, it doesn't always help it. That brightness at times can be a detriment to the entire image, whether it's contrast ratio or even black levels. Speaking of local dimming, we are actually having it on standard and normal, which is standard for Panasonic, trying to push blooming, and you'll see that they are both excellent. A little more haloing around the Hisense. That light you see on the top is just the glare from behind me that is not blooming. They are both excellent in terms of local dimming, dead on. There are times where the Hisense can crush details, and there's times where blooming will come out of nowhere, meaning it's not that it can't, or the local dimming isn't very good, or the zones aren't there. It can be erratic at times. In certain content, you'll see blooming in a spot where you wouldn't think it would be, almost like a hot spot you would see on a projector. While the local dimming on the Panasonic is not nearly as aggressive, it is as effective. However, the viewing angles aren't as good as the U8N, which I'll show you in a little bit. Now, what I love about the Panasonic W95A is the accuracy. It looks good in every single preset. You'll see me switch here between something more accurate to something more dynamic in a moment. But it never looks out of place. It never looks like it's pushing beyond its abilities, meaning there isn't noise in the image. The Hisense looks excellent here too. Now, as I switch to something a bit more poppy, pushing them both into their vivid and dynamic presets, they actually both look excellent with Jennifer Gala's content here. But even in a dynamic preset, the Panasonic never really looks inaccurate. It never looks like it's going above and beyond in losing its filmmaker approach. However, if you want more pop and you want more saturation, the Hisense has much more headroom, not just in terms of peak brightness, but in terms of the settings that will get you there. The settings are a little bit more elaborate, meaning you can change the image quite a bit. Panasonic won't break that adherence to its accuracy, even in its most dynamic preset, something you may or may not like. Testing the black bars in our next demo from Jennifer Gala, we are going to take it out of a more accurate preset. We'll do that in real time and move it over to vivid, and same with the Panasonic, moving it to dynamic. The reason for this is to really push the peak brightness and really test the local dimming. Though most manufacturers have gotten excellent with their black bar control. That menu, by the way, that you see on the Panasonic, that's not blooming. That is just an overlay that they add. It looks just like that on their OLEDs as well. Completely dead center, they are both equal. I actually favor the Panasonic on center. However, when we get up and move over to the side, you'll see that no matter how much I go over, the U8N is excellent. Blacks are very deep, very slight haloing on the top of the black bars and in the corner. You see on the Panasonic, as I get over to an extreme angle, they turn somewhat purple. It is a smaller TV, so the viewing angles aren't quite as impressive. See it there? Nothing on the Hisense, but as I mentioned earlier, the Hisense has a better local dimming overall. However, it is erratic, meaning that it's processing versus hardware, it's algorithm versus capability. Up next, SDR. SDR looks very good. There is one extra preset from Hisense with his HDR Theater Day. SDR, nothing to report. It looks as consistent as HDR in terms of the presets looking different from one another as if they were in HDR. Excellent by both. Within the same demo here, going from something very dynamic and vibrant to something more filmmaker, the idea here is to show you differences in brightness and consistency. The presets will look very much the same in filmmaker. However, you can see the brightness difference in this shot. The idea is to show you the flexibility of both, how similar they can look and how different they also can look. I will stay in filmmaker this entire time for the color section, as I want them to both have the most accurate color reproduction. And by the way, every preset has been changed to a similar color temperature, otherwise they remain untouched. There's no disabling of processing if it's in standard or normal. Meaning if a dynamic contrast is on the Hisense and it isn't on the Panasonic, I don't perceptually match them. Panasonic does have a similar feature. I leave that the way it is by the manufacturer. What I'm showing you is signature versus signature. I'm not trying to nerf the Hisense or make it look more accurate than it is. Actually, the Hisense has gotten more accurate, and as a manufacturer, more accurate as the years have gone on. Processing much better than it ever has been. Panasonic, the clear winner in processing and up conversion as we go through the various presets. Hisense has a few less presets and does have, however, more flexibility of image. Panasonic has more presets, however, they are very similar from one another, with dynamic being the outlier, being the one that is more vibrant and more saturated. Meaning, while you can get the image you want, if you want something crazy saturated with crazy pop, the Panasonic might not be for you. I would definitely choose the Hisense for that. However, that said, the Hisense, though it can be made to look very accurate, it can't be made to really match the Panasonic in terms of upscaling and processing. It still doesn't have the same color luminance. It just can't get there in terms of the accuracy that Panasonic is delivering. So for pop, as I mentioned in the beginning, Hisense; for accuracy, Panasonic. They can meet somewhere in the middle, but you have to know yourself, which is why as I go through these videos and go through the length of them and the presets, is to have you figure out which preset you favor, which look you prefer. That is more important than anyone telling you which is right. I could leave them in filmmaker the entire time. However, that just cripples one over the other, which is why you see me going through all of the presets in very dynamic content. Now, when I mention about lack of luminance, is at times you'll see the Hisense being brighter to its detriment, meaning it will lose color, it will lose detail, it will wash out. The Panasonic doesn't get nearly as bright, however, always looks accurate. There are shots here where the Panasonic looks dim in comparison. If you had seen this video 2 or 3 years ago, you would have thought the Panasonic was an OLED. Again, a great thing, but not a great thing depending on your taste of mini LED. The Hisense is also a much better value. Now, comparisons are very interesting as the camera is picking them up the way that I see them. There's definitely a different shade of color and a different hue that is on the Hisense that's not on the Panasonic. I noticed that when I put the Hisense against Samsung's QN90D. It almost looked like they were quantum dot OLEDs versus WOLEDs, which isn't the case. They are both quantum dots that you're seeing on the W95A and the Hisense U8N. It is the signature, it's how they get there. Again, moving into more accurate presets, IMAX versus Professional 1. Now you'll see very little change from the W95A. Even when I go through Professional 1 and 2, True Cinema, Filmmaker, Cinema, Normal is really standard. Auto AI has all of the processing enabled and still has a little bit more punch than Normal. Normal being the standard preset from other manufacturers. Now again, while the Panasonic has the flexibility, and I said the Hisense couldn't get there in terms of accuracy, the Panasonic can't get there in terms of vibrancy, unless you're jumping into dynamic. Very hard to make their Cinema or True Cinema seem eye-searingly bright. It just doesn't have that. And I think even if it had the peak brightness under the hood, I don't think Panasonic would allow it to get there. Their adherence to the filmmaker is amazing. It's something that if you like that look, it is one of the best in the business. In many ways, out-Sonying Sony. Now, for you guys watching in the comments and you watch these premieres, the community, thank you guys so much. I love you guys. That's why I leave these videos long for you. Having Panasonic back is an absolute gift. The more competition, the better. However, with Hisense and TCL, these more value-based brands are punching so beyond their weight. The value proposition is ridiculous. Getting something so much larger for high-end performance is something that is very hard to ignore. However, as I mentioned, processing, the fine details are what you're really paying for when you go with the other manufacturers. But keep in mind, Hisense improves every single year. Their TVs are not just incrementally better, they are much better year after year. Can't say that about the other top manufacturers. Now, in our Fire Girl demo from Jennifer Gala in the HDR Super Channel, you're seeing me start in Filmmaker. You're seeing how good the local dimming is on both. On lesser local dimming, you'll see trailing. I'm going to repeat half of this demo in a more dynamic preset. I'm going to move it into both normal and HDR standard. Now keep in mind, the Panasonic is always in HDR other than the SDR portion. It's not labeled as HDR normal, it's just normal. So I put it in as HDR standard, but I wanted you to see the same demo, same dynamic demo in a poppy preset versus an accurate one. The accurate presets can hide blooming at times. We're not doing that in this video. You're not seeing the exposure change with the conditions. The way the conditions change in the room is whether it's light or dark. I'm not changing the exposure to change blooming or add blooming. What I see is what you see. Or I should say, you see what I see. And we have to admit, at this price point, the local dimming is excellent. Local dimming used to be the first thing that would go by the wayside if things were more value-based. Even the W95A is a good value. It isn't a flagship mini LED. Processing king for the Panasonic, vibrancy, and HDR impact king for the Hisense. We're going to move into sport mode. I'm not going to play sports due to copyright, and pause sports didn't really do it, though I'll show you some paused movies. But the sports preset from both Hisense and a W95A from Panasonic look better once you warm them up. I'm not really somebody that puts my TVs into sports, but I did want to show you the vibrancy from both. It's another vibrant preset from Panasonic. They both look excellent. What do you see in terms of detail retention and vibrancy, vice versa? Looking at movie performance in Filmmaker with a variety of movies from different eras, from the past and from the present. Upscaling and processing is where the Panasonic will pull away, and current films is where the U8N will look more vibrant and have more HDR impact. However, I'd argue the depth is more welcome on the more OLED-like W95A. Here from this classic 1951 original thing, the local dimming much better on the Panasonic. Now that could also be due that it's not as bright. However, the contrast seems better as the brightness is not eliminating the color as it is on the U8N. Now, other than the glare, look around the image carefully as you move into The Godfather and Godfather 2. The Panasonic has a better upscaling without really crushing the blacks. As aggressive as the U8N is, below 4K content and below 1080p content, it sometimes struggles to know what to do with the black level. Moving into gaming next. Moving into gaming, they are tied in regards to their feature set. Both have HDMI 2.1, both are capable of 4K, 144 Hz. They all have the variable refresh rate features, though the W95A is lacking the NVIDIA G-Sync that has presently been on the Z95A. Not really a big loss, even if you're a PC gamer. Variable refresh rate is excellent of any form on either PC or console. I personally prefer the look of the game mode on the Panasonic. It does have much better clarity and it has a warmer image. There is a cool image on the U8N, even though the warmth has been turned up. It does have that bluish look to it, even in person, not noticeable when it's alone. They both have various game bars, which is the norm these days. They each have different presets. I'll show you the differences between them. We're going to stay in the standard game mode. You have True Game, which I don't love the look. It's a more accurate preset for the W95A. The Hisense U8N has more flexibility in how to change the image, though they both are rather limited in their ability to change the game mode. They kind of are what they are. Even when you jump out of the different presets, they can't really change the image all that much. Both excellent gaming TVs. Again, keep in mind for the price, you might be able to get a larger U8N. Always keep that in mind throughout the comparison. As you see me moving through the various settings on the Hisense, the different genre settings. Now, obviously with both TVs, you can move in and out of game mode and go into the other presets if you want a higher input lag. Should have mentioned this earlier, the tone mapping on both TVs is excellent. We talk about processing, but the ability to change the tone mapping does change the image more substantially on the Hisense U8N versus the Panasonic. Very much like Sony, when you change the tone mapping on the Panasonic, it doesn't change the image all that much. There is a way to customize the tone mapping and the roll off or the clipping on the Panasonic. Can't do that on the Hisense. However, the Hisense has more flexibility of image, not so much in game mode, but in the other presets with other content. Now, between Ghost of Tsushima, we're looking at shadow detail and detail with the flames moving around him. And now with Demon Souls, very hard, as you're not really seeing, as I cut off a little bit of the screen there, any haloing around the heads-up display. Again, I apologize for the glare. It's not really hitting the TV, but they both do well going from dark to light, back to dark again. Excellent gaming TVs, both of them. Now, in closing, wrapping up gaming, it really is depending on your taste. Again, more vibrant, more HDR impact, more flexibility of image. I would go with the Hisense U8N. It is a better value. However, if you want the most accurate, most even-keeled experience in all content, the Panasonic is the one to go for. All right, guys, I'm Brian. This is Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. Love you guys. Take care.
It's better to burn out than to fade away. There can be only one.